Good morning, everyone. All right, great to see everyone. Let's give a round of applause to Ronald and Susan Glidden. And that gentleman you see next to them will be our finale. So we'll look forward to that. So just want to welcome everyone here. A lot of planning in this. It's great to see everyone. The weather looks good. I'd like to just recognize a couple of members of the 250th committee. Tamsin George. Tamsin, where are you? Okay. Karen Rinaldi. Rachel Lovett. Admiral Sandy Stoltz. And sort of our ad hoc is Kevin. So we're going to keep everything on schedule so that you don't have to stand here for 3 hours. We're going to keep it under an hour. And again, let's have some fun. And we got a great group of speakers. And we are going to start with Reverend Nell Fields.
Please be with me in the spirit of prayer. God of this day and all days, God of this place and all places, we gather on these shores in gratitude, grateful for this day and for the splendor of creation that surrounds us. We are grateful that our community played a part in this great story called the United States of America, one that has endured for 250 years. It is a story woven into our own stories. For no matter who we are or whence we came, we all yearn for freedom, liberty, and equality. As we dedicate this plaque in commemoration of our past, help us to dedicate ourselves to the promise of the future, a vision imagined long ago where we stand in unity, strengthened by our diversity, where we accept and welcome one another, working together for the common good, and recognizing our shared humanity and the better angels of our nature. God of many names, may we become living stones to all that is possible. Give us courage to speak truth, humility to listen to one another, and wisdom to discern our way forward together. We ask this in the name of all that is holy, all that is good, and all that is light. Amen.
Thank you, Nell. Two other ad hoc members of the committee I forgot. Henry St. Julian, Bob Muscali, and now I'm going to ask Admiral Sandy Stoltz to come forward, and we're going to do Pledge of Allegiance.
Good morning, everybody, and welcome. I invite you all to turn and face the flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you, and happy 250th.
And now we're going to have the Star Spangled Banner sung by Troy Clarkson.
Please rise if you can and remove your caps. Oh, say, can you see by the dawn's early light what so proudly we hailed at the twilight's last gleaming, whose broad stripes and bright stars through the perilous fight o'er the ramparts we watched were so gallantly streaming, and the rocket's red glare, the bombs bursting in air, gave proof through the night that our flag was still there. Oh, say, does that star-spangled banner yet wave o'er the land of the free and the home of the brave?
Thank you, Troy. Now, I'm going to ask our town manager, Mike Renshaw, to come forward with town greetings.
Good morning, everyone. Mike Renshaw, your town manager. So when I found out I was following Troy singing the Star-Spangled Banner a cappella, I knew I was in trouble. Another round of applause for Troy. That was magnificent. So greetings. On behalf of the Town of Falmouth Select Board, the 250th Anniversary Task Force members, both past and present, and all those who helped organize today's dedication ceremony, it is my great honor to welcome you as we gather to remember one of the defining moments in our amazing community's history, the Battle of Falmouth of April 2nd, 1779. Nearly 250 years ago, the people of Falmouth faced a dire threat. British forces operating from the waters surrounding Cape Cod sought to punish this community for its resistance to the crown. Following earlier confrontations over supplies and livestock, plans were made to attack and burn the town of Falmouth. Thanks to a warning delivered just in the nick of time and the courage of local citizens, Falmouth's militia assembled to defend their homes, their families, and their neighbors. Standing under the leadership of Major Joseph Dimmock, they successfully repelled the British assaults and preserved the town from destruction. And folks, this occurred just over my shoulder 250 years ago, almost 250 years ago. Their victory was not one of overwhelming numbers or through superior firepower. It was a victory born of determination, preparation, and an unwavering belief that their homes and liberties were worth defending. They were farmers, fishermen, tradesmen, physicians, and neighbors who answered the call when their community needed them the most. Yes, the Battle of Falmouth is sometimes overshadowed by some of the larger Revolutionary War engagements. Yet history reminds us that the American Revolution was won not only on famous battlefields, but also in communities just like ours, where ordinary citizens demonstrated extraordinary courage. Every town that resisted, every family that sacrificed, and every patriot who stood their ground contributed to the birth of a new nation. As we gather here today, we also recognize that this commemoration and dedication is about more than remembering our past. It is about understanding the values that shaped our community: service, resilience, sacrifice, and accountability to one another. I think we can all agree that those values remain as important today as they were back in 1779. As we participate in today's ceremony, let us reflect not only on the events of April 2nd, 1779, but also on the incredible patriots behind those events. They could not have known that future generations would gather to remember them like we are this morning. Yet their actions left a legacy that continues to define Falmouth's character: service, resilience, sacrifice, and accountability to each other. May we honor their memory by being good stewards of our history, by strengthening our great community, and by passing these stories on to those who will follow us. Thank you again for joining us to commemorate and dedicate the Battle of Falmouth monument. May this dedication ceremony remind us the preservation of freedom has always and will always depend upon ordinary people willing to do very extraordinary things. Again, greetings, welcome, and thank you very much.
Thank you, Mike, and thank you for the work you do for our town. After the event, what's important is you'll see that flag up there. Okay, that's where the plaque is. That's where the stone is. And we thought it was much safer to have the event here, but just want to let folks know we're going to be unveiling plaque number 2, but that's where the plaque is installed up there, okay? At this time, I'd like to ask Karen Rinaldi to come up, and I call her our Town of Falmouth historian. And everybody knows Karen. You've seen the beautiful T-shirts she's done for years, you know, all the artwork she's done. But she's going to give you a little brief history of why we have put the plaque up there. So thank you, Karen.
Good morning, everyone, and welcome, distinguished guests and friends. 50 years ago, we celebrated the nation's bicentennial. I was very pleased and honored to be a part of that. And now the 250 celebration, the semi-quincentennial, and to serve with this wonderful committee that we've spent a lot of time with under the direction and the leadership of Bob Ripley. I am very grateful to have been part of this moment. Thank you. And today we celebrate the Battle of Falmouth, often referred to as the Battle of Cape Cod. It took place in 3 days in April 1779. I'm going to give you a brief synopsis of what the conditions were. The arrival of British ships in Tarpaulin Cove and the destruction of property was beyond comprehension, and farmers stood their ground to protect their goods and their families. I'm going to repeat this phrase because I think it's very important, and it has been used by our town manager. Ordinary people doing extraordinary things in these times. There was a tavern owner by the name of John Slocum. He lived on Pasque Island. He was a loyalist and a Tory, and he overhears plans of this crew to bomb and burn Falmouth. He has sympathetic feelings for his friends on the mainland. He has 2 sons. One is Oliver and one is William. William is the older boy. He's 10 years old. And he sends William out in the middle of the night to row a boat to the shores of Falmouth to spread the alarm of what the threat is. This boy becomes a man in just a few minutes, and he also becomes our Falmouth's Paul Revere. John Slocum, at that moment, put politics aside, and camaraderie became the mood of the day. The boy reaches the shores and he spreads the alarm to Major Dimmock, warning him of the impending danger. The trenches are built and the men take position. They successfully fight off the British forces. No one is killed, and Falmouth is the only town on Cape Cod to repel these forces, overcoming incredible odds. The British abandon plans to destroy Falmouth and they retreat, and Major Dimmock and his militia prevail. There were 2 other towns involved in that battle. One was Barnstable and the other was Sandwich. Ordinary citizens doing extraordinary things sums up the actions and the mood of Falmouth at that time. Now, 400 years ago, don't get frightened by that, a Sakonnet Narragansett area tribe leader associated with the Wampanoags. This was a female sachem by the name of Awashanks. She summited up here on the hill. It's called Great Hill. She summited here because of the breezes, the beautiful vista, and the close proximity, a strategic proximity to Martha's Vineyard. She was a strong woman, an aristocrat of her time, and she has a place in history, as do we. This great hill is the same hill we've selected. The 250 committee scoured the shores of Falmouth and selected this hill because of its sweeping views of the Sound to Nobsca area and beyond, to the Elizabeth Islands and the shores of Surf Drive and the area of the old stone dock where the battle occurred. This gives us a very interesting perspective of the times. The granite boulder has a very nice pink hue to it, and it was hand-selected by some committee members from West Falmouth quarries. And there are evidence of pink granite in our town, from Captain's Manor to an old barn in West Falmouth, and our President Kennedy at the National Arlington Cemetery at the Eternal Flame. The plaque was mounted by Grafton Briggs of Baker Monument. Now, the plaque tells the story of the boy in the boat. And it was to help tell that story that I did this piece in a simple black and white drawing that became the 250th logo. Peter McConaty, Director of Public Works Administration, has had challenge coins made to commemorate this special mission. A great story on so many levels. And the topping to the cake up there is the Betsy Ross flag, America's first flag. But the story of the rock, of the battle, goes to brotherhood, friendship, and loyalty, and overcoming these incredible odds, which is really what the challenge coin also represents. Historians and visual historians record these stories as close to truth that primary sources provide. However, the mystery in history, as I refer to it, is always underpinning the believable and the unbelievable. It is our hope that these findings create curiosity and spark further interest in our past. And we hope that the Battle of 1779 is recreated in 2079, and perhaps Kevin Doyle, Lexington Minuteman and historian in Falmouth, will take charge of that mission. Awashonks and the Wampanoag people of the First Light are an important part of our beginnings. The Battle of Falmouth is our history, and we honor that memory and bravery of ordinary citizens doing extraordinary things. We, the 250 committee, celebrate this commemoration with all of you today on July 1st, 2026. Thank you all for coming out.
Thank you, Karen. And again, be sure to walk up the hill there and see the stone, the plaque, and really just to kind of look out over the vista. So I'd like to invite now Sheriff Donna Buckley, and she's going to do a proclamation.
Good morning, everyone. Be it known that this Barnstable County Sheriff's Office hereby extends its congratulations to the town of Falmouth and the Falmouth 250 Committee. Whereas, as part of the nationwide commemoration of the 250th anniversary of the American Revolution, the town of Falmouth and the Falmouth 250 Committee will dedicate a new historic plaque honoring the Battle of Falmouth, April 1779, the only land battle fought on Cape Cod during the Revolutionary War. And whereas, in dedicating this plaque as part of making the 250th anniversary of the United States of America, Falmouth has demonstrated exceptional commitment to honoring our nation's history, preserving its own rich heritage, and fostering a deep sense of community pride. And whereas these efforts reflect the values that have long defined both our country and the people of Falmouth: service, resilience, and a shared commitment to the common good. Now, therefore, as Sheriff of Barnstable County, I am honored to present this citation to the town of Falmouth, Massachusetts, in recognition of its outstanding commitment to preserving our shared history, commemorating the courage of those who fought in the Battle of Falmouth, and inspiring future generations to carry forward the spirit of patriotism and civic pride that defines the great Commonwealth of Massachusetts. The Sheriff of Barnstable County offers this official recognition as a symbol of her gratitude and admiration on this first day of July, 2026.
Thank you, Sheriff Buckley. Now I'd like to introduce Michael Kasparian. He is the Executive Director of the Falmouth Chamber of Commerce. Michael?
Thank you, Bob. Good morning. On behalf of the advisory board and the members of the Falmouth Chamber of Commerce, I'd like to welcome you all here. There's a couple of neat little facts I'd like to share with people. For those of you who don't know, Falmouth has more coastline than any town in Massachusetts, 88 miles. And we also have only 2 degrees of separation between the people who live here. So those of you who live here know how that is. If we go back to the Battle of Falmouth, Cape Cod, of course, was a peninsula, and the population was much smaller, but there was still 2 degrees of separation. And as Falmouth grew and became what it is today, it went through a series of changes, really fascinating when we look at it from the perspective of the Chamber of Commerce. Of course, at the time of the battle, it was an agrarian society, fishing, fields, farming, but then very soon thereafter, going into the early part of the 19th century and into the mid part, whaling became an important part of our economy here. And then what came next was the railroad. And when the railroad came, that's when the first parts of tourism really began in our town. Of course, it looks very different than it does today. They were mostly the wealthy folks from Boston that were coming down, taking the train down to Falmouth Station, building churches, and doing all these great things. We continued to grow, and of course, at the end of the 1800s, that's when our scientific communities down in Woods Hole began to come together. Marine Biological Laboratory, Woods Hole Oceanographic Institution, and now we're home to a dozen organizations that work on behalf of the planet, on behalf of our biology. As we entered the 20th century, tourism became a little bit different. People started coming down, families started coming down. People started building hotels, very much like, we're gonna go across the street, right, Bob, to the wharf? We saw these big wooden hotels that were all over. And people started coming down, of course, by the 1950s and 1960s during Camelot and the whole Kennedy years. You didn't go on vacation with your family unless you came to Cape Cod. Of course, there were bridges by then, there were more people, but we still maintained the 2 degrees of separation. As we continue to grow, and up until the time now where we have 33,000 full-time residents here, COVID brought in a lot of changes. Falmouth, its new economy, has turned into, we're a retirement community, becoming more of a retirement community, a second homeowner community, and that helps drive our commerce, that helps drive our industry, our businesses, and our organizations. And I would be remiss if I didn't point out our school superintendent, Lori Dorr, who is here. Nice to see you, and all the different organizations that work together in Falmouth. The Falmouth Chamber of Commerce, we have a 7-member advisory board, and by our bylaws, they have to include Falmouth Public Schools, police and fire, public safety, the scientific community, the nonprofit industry, the profit industry, healthcare, so that everyone is represented and we make sure that everybody in the community gets what they need. So again, back to the Battle of Falmouth, where we've heard a couple of times, you know, incredible people coming out and doing extraordinary things. That's still happening here today. Those of you who live here, those of you who witness our town meeting know how much this town means to people, how people come together. We support our schools. We support our Falmouth Fire and Police. We support our tourism industry, and we support our citizens who are here. So in the spirit of the Battle of Falmouth, that's still going on. I hope most of you who are here are going to be here through the holiday weekend. It's going to be a great time. Enjoy it, and thank you very much for the opportunity to speak to you.
Thank you, Bob. Thank you, Michael. And what Michael didn't say is spend, 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 okay? All right. So now I'd like to introduce State Representative Thomas Moakley.
Good morning, everybody. I have a dual responsibility today. I'm going to make a special presentation to the town, and to that effect, I'd like to invite Select Board members Bob Miscali and Doug Brown, if you're still here, to join us, as well as Bob Ripley from the 250th Committee and Mike Renshaw. And while they're making their way up here, I just want to say a special thank you to the town of Falmouth, DPW, Peter McConerty and his team, the Falmouth Police Department, Chief Laurie and his team, as well as all the members of the 250th Committee and all the other participants here today that made this possible. So on behalf of the Massachusetts 250th Committee, as well as Revolutionary Spaces and the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, I have this special copy of the Declaration of Independence to present to the town. These are being distributed to all 351 towns across the Commonwealth in recognition of the semi-quincentennial. So on behalf of the Commonwealth, to the town of Falmouth. And some very brief remarks, I promise. Now that I have transmitted the words of Thomas Jefferson, there was a committee, but we all know who wrote the original draft, one of the founders of our republic. I also want to share some words that have been ringing in my head from one of the key preservers of our republic a few decades after the founding. Those of you who know me will find it to be no surprise that I've been reading a lot of Abraham Lincoln's words lately. And he revered the founding fathers, and he felt that it was the duty of each successive generation to carry on that legacy. And speaking to a group of young people, he said, "This task of gratitude to our fathers, justice to ourselves, duty to posterity, and love for our species in general, how then shall we perform it? At what point shall we expect the approach of danger? By what means shall we fortify against it? Shall we expect some transatlantic military giant to step the ocean and crush us at a blow? Never. All the armies of Europe, Asia, and Africa combined, with all the treasure of the earth in their military chest, with a Bonaparte for our commander, could not by force take a drink from the Ohio or make a track on the Blue Ridge in a trial of 1,000 years. At what point, then, is the approach of danger to be expected? I answer, if it ever reach us, it must spring up amongst us. It cannot come from abroad. If destruction be our lot, we must ourselves be its author and finisher. As a nation of free men, we must live through all time or die by suicide." I find those words to be a reminder that the promise of the Declaration and of the Constitution, while self-evident, is not self-fulfilling. It requires us to show up. It requires us to participate. It requires us to make room for ideas that differ from our own and find a way to reconcile them as neighbors so that the Republic endures peacefully for another 250 years. That starts at the local level, and I have so much gratitude for those of you here in Falmouth that volunteer your time in civic life with a spirit of cheerful service that makes that a living document. Thank you for all that you've given me, for all that you do for one another, and for all that you do for this town.
Thank you, Tom. I'd like to introduce now Rachel Lovett, Museum of the Greens Executive Director, and she is going to introduce our keynote speaker, Dr. Martin. Rachel?
Thank you, Bob. I'm so pleased today to be here as the Executive Director of the Falmouth Historical Society and also a member of the 250th Committee. In January of 2024, my staff and I sat around and we were talking about an exhibition for the 250th. And during our planning, we thought about our big idea. When you're planning an exhibition, the big idea is something that you want people to walk away from knowing. And it is very interesting because it has really resonated today in the remarks from the speakers. Ordinary people doing extraordinary things. So if you come to the Falmouth Museums on the Green, which I encourage you to do so, also the Falmouth Historical Society, we're one and the same organization, we are turning 125 years this year. So we're exactly half as old as the country, which is no small feat. We're the oldest historical society on Cape Cod. A few years ago, we also made a commitment to be free and open to the public. So if you have not been to the museum, I encourage you to come and experience all the things we have to offer. We have a beautiful 2-acre campus, 3 beautiful buildings, and again, we're always free and open to the public. We currently have an exhibition, Resistance and Resilience, the Road from Revolution from 1779 up until 1850, which talks about the Battle of Falmouth and then everything Falmouth became afterwards. This is a lovely exhibition, and it features items from our permanent collection. The Falmouth Historical Society has one of the largest collections on Cape Cod, and I encourage you to come and experience that. Now, I have the privilege of introducing our keynote speaker, Dr. David Martin. Dr. Martin is a wonderful speaker. He was a dean of a college in Washington, D.C. for many years. He holds a bachelor's from Yale, a master's from Harvard, and a PhD from Boston College. In his retirement, he has been the president of Marston Mills Historical Society, treasurer of the Yale Club of Cape Cod, and he's an active leader in the Cape Cod Genealogical Society. So with that being said, Dr. Martin, please join us at the podium.
Thanks very much, Rachel. The story you've heard about the Battle of Falmouth, as told by both Michael Renshaw and Karen Rinaldo, gives you some really important information that unfortunately is not widely known in this period of when we're celebrating the 250th anniversary of this country. I'm hoping that we can all make it better known, because it is a story of, as was well said just a moment ago, ordinary people doing extraordinary things. And of course, there's been many instances in our history of that same phenomenon. I'm not going to repeat the events of April 2 and 3 with a couple of exceptions, and I want to just focus a little bit on a case study, because I think it gives a little insight into looking at an example of one of the many people who served in this action. One of the details that I think is interesting about the battle is what happened after the British were turned away. In the case of the musket fire of the 220 men who were crouched behind earthworks along Surf Drive, is that research indicates that it is approximately at least 11 seconds to reload an 18th century musket to get off a second volley. These members of the Falmouth militia, the 220 of them, managed to get off 2 volleys and caused the British to change their mind. And I think that's a feat in itself. After they got discouraged and went back to their ships, they weren't done yet. And they came equipped with incendiary projectiles that they aimed back toward Falmouth from their ships. But let's remember what time it was. It was April 3rd, 1779. What do we know about the winter on Cape Cod today as well as then, perhaps? And that is that the ground has been frozen for several months. Now it's beginning to thaw. These projectiles were designed to hit the ground, bounce and bounce and bounce until they hit something and burst into flames. Some structures apparently were burned, but if we think about the weather and the conditions at the time, the ground was thawing. And so the projectiles, instead of bouncing, hit and fizzled and created, perhaps, if we had been there, a thud. And so Falmouth was saved partly because of that circumstance, but mainly because of the heroism of these members of the militia. I think it's helpful to put the militia into perspective. They were not members of the Continental Army. That, of course, was a group of sometimes called regulars who were, of course, fighting up and down the East Coast by that time in terms of being 1779 under General Washington. Militia were ordinary people like you and me, farmers, craftsmen, in some cases merchants, fishermen for sure, who had other things that we did in our lives, trying to survive and make a living. But we were also members of a group of people from a local region that, when the need arose, were called into action to mobilize. And that was sometimes called an alarm. In other words, when a notification went out that the British seemed to be approaching at a certain place and they might arrive by tomorrow, the alarm went out. And all of a sudden, these people mobilized, they dropped their plows, they came together. And you've heard the mention of Major Joseph Dimmick. Yes, he was the commander of the Falmouth militia. Sometimes the militia collaborated with militia from other communities nearby, such as Sandwich and Barnstable. This particular action seems to have been from the Falmouth militia itself. And all along Surf Drive here, in previous times to the battle, some what you might call earthworks had been built up, high enough for a man to be able to hide behind up to waist, to crouch behind in a group all along a stretch of earthworks with the musket at the ready position. And so when the son of John Slocum made his very important ride in a rowboat at night from Noshawn Island to Woods Hole, he was able to alert the militia in time, perhaps through the parents of a friend that he visited, and under the cover of night, they reinforced those earthworks so that by the time the dawn came, the militia were ready, 220 of them according to some records, crouched behind the earthworks. Some paintings have been done of this event. One of the paintings that hangs in the Falmouth Historical Society Museum shows a single figure walking across the top of the earthworks back and forth from the point of view of now seeing the men from behind all crouched behind. And in the distance are the British boats. So the British boats only saw Major Dimmick marching apparently nonchalantly back and forth. Naturally, he was looking down to the side to make sure his men were ready, but perhaps that interpretation of that painting is that there was some very good deception involved. And of course, when the time came for appropriate, when the men were in the water, the British Marines, so to speak, then the first volley happened by all the group rising up and firing at once, and then reloading, and then firing a second volley. According to some records, they killed 13 and wounded 20, enough to make them change their mind and return to their ships. One of the things that I've thought would be interesting to talk about for a moment here is a case study. And I'm happy to tell you that there's been a project of the Falmouth Genealogical Society which has successfully marked the graves of every identifiable Revolutionary veteran in Falmouth, and with a GPS marker. And so this is very precise. Now, of course, there are more Revolutionary veterans in Falmouth than the particular ones that have been marked. We don't know where some of them are, and that is true all over the United States. There's a work in progress to identify. But in this 250th year, a great many have been identified and honored with ceremonies and appropriate kinds of markings. Well, Abraham Swift of Falmouth, my fourth great-grandfather, born in 1762, lived to 1840, was also in the War of 1812, was 16 years old in 1779, and as a young person, that was the minimum age, he was a fifer. And thanks to our fife and drum duo, whom I heard make a presentation 6 weeks ago, I learned that a fifer wasn't just playing music for entertainment, that a fifer was playing signals that were instructions for battle. Very important role for a person who was the fifer. In fact, in the din of battle, of course, the gunfire sometimes could drown out the drum, but the fifer was high enough that it could be heard for that purpose as well as other purposes. And so my ancestor, Abraham Swift, signed up and became a member of the Falmouth militia at that time for the period of the service and responded to alarms in not only Falmouth, but in Dartmouth and New Bedford as well during the years of his service. I think that it's very understandable that anyone who is a descendant of an ancestor of that person then takes pride in the fact that they're known and understood and the stories are passed down from generation to generation. My ancestor wasn't any exceptional individual. In fact, being young and 16 years old and a fifer, it was limited in the way that he could be engaged without having a firearm. But the fact is that I too have been to his gravesite and we have honored it in the appropriate way. So the point here is that for Falmouth, as a community, marking the time of the apparently only land battle on Cape Cod of the Revolution as something to be truly proud of and something to carry with us. And this is for everyone who has any connection with Falmouth at all. And I think that one of the things we have to remember is that these people like us, stepped up, they stepped forward, and they not only preserved independence, but they left us liberty that we still enjoy today, and we need to preserve that forever. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Martin. Our final speaker is Bob Miscali of the Falmouth Select Board, and also was our 250th liaison from the town in the 250th committee.
Good morning and thank you. On behalf of the Falmouth Select Board, our chair Heather Goldstone, our vice chair Colin Reed, members Doug Brown, who's here this morning, Elizabeth Klein, and myself, thank you for being here. You know, a day after we had to worry whether our Supreme Court would uphold our Constitution, days such as this, remembering and recognizing the events of the past 250 years are of critical importance, and I appreciate your being here and recognizing and celebrating the bravery that this town exhibited almost 250 years ago during the Battle of Falmouth. I'd also like to thank specifically Town Manager Renshaw, Chief of Police Jeff Laurie and his staff, DPW Chief Peter McConerty, and Jeremiah Pearson getting the Betsy Ross flag up there for everyone to see today, and also FCTV for being here and recording this. So thank you all. So I know that I am what is preventing you from refreshments over at the newly opened old casino. So I will be brief, but I did want to read a proclamation that our board adopted on Monday evening. Whereas the 250 Committee is proud to represent the citizens of Falmouth on Cape Cod at a ceremony on July 1, 2026, recognizing and honoring those patriots who defended the town of Falmouth against a British invasion on April 2, 1779. And whereas, as part of the ceremony, the committee will be delivering and dedicating as a gift to the town of Falmouth of a commemorative pink granite marker and plaque to be placed on the historic Falmouth Heights, Great Hill, overlooking Vineyard Sound, stretching to Tarpaulin Cove, the site of the British departure, to the shores of Surf Drive Beach, the site of the invasion and the Patriots' defense against the invasion. And whereas the Battle of Falmouth is often referred to as the Battle of Cape Cod, it is our desire to honor that memory, the people's bravery and their foresight, as we celebrate the nation's 250 years of democracy on July 4, 2026. Now, therefore, we, Heather M.H. Goldstone, Colin W. Reed, Douglas C. Brown, Robert P. Muscali, and Elizabeth Klein, members of the Falmouth Select Board, do hereby proclaim July 1, 2026 to be Battle of Cape Cod Recognition Day in the town of Falmouth, and urge all our citizens to observe this day with appropriate programs, ceremonies, and activities. We have hereunto set our hand and caused the great seal of the town of Falmouth to be affixed on this 29th day of June, 2026. Thank you. Bob, you'll take care of that? Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. So before we do the unveiling, I just want to thank a few people. You know, this is an hour, and, you know, there's about 100 hours of work that went into providing this hour. And again, Bob mentioned a few. We'd certainly like to, you know, thank the DPW, the 250th Committee. I don't know if I should thank the Select Board for appointing me, because it's been a lot of work on committee. But the town manager said, we want this to be the best, you know, best event on the Cape. And I think we've done that, you know, because of so many people that helped us. And certainly want to thank Chief Laurie and the police for keeping us safe and helping us get this set up. FCTV, thank you. The Enterprise have been incredible. I mean, we've done no fewer than probably 8 or 10 articles over the last year. And I know Linlin said, don't point me out or thank me, but I'm going to thank him because he's been incredible. He's done some great stories, and again, we really appreciate it. There's one person, though, that I really want to mention. My partner in crime is Peter McConaty. You know, we have gone and looked at rocks, we have gone and looked at stones, we have gone and looked at grounds to where to have this all, but, you know, I just want to say a heartfelt thank you, Peter. Couldn't have done this without you. Thank you. And so we're going to do the unveiling. Again, the real plaque is up there, but we wanted you to see something. And so after we do this, we're going to do the unveiling, and then we're going to have the musket shot. And then, so I'd like to ask the 250th Committee to come forward. And then Jamie Booth is going to do the musket shot. But don't forget, as Bob said, is the old wharf. Alex has invited folks over there to check out the new digs, also for refreshments. So, all right. All right, so whoever's closest, flip it up. All right, flip it up. Karen, you designed it, flip it up.
Karen, you flip it up. Where is it?
So there it is.
Oops, sorry. Don't forget the Liberty Tree.
Yeah. So thank you, everyone. And again, yes, we're, you know, across Commonwealth of Massachusetts and across the country is folks are doing Liberty trees. So in September, we're going to be having a Liberty tree that's going to be installed at the library grounds. So more to come. But again, thank you. Everybody have a safe and happy 4th. And again, thank you for coming out.